In a time long lost to the pages of history, when kingdoms rose and fell with the clash of swords and the roar of war drums, the seas held secrets deeper than any man could fathom. The earth trembled beneath the weight of empires, yet the ocean remained a silent, ever-watchful witness. It whispered stories to those brave enough to listen, tales of lost souls, of battles fought beneath the surface, of love forbidden by the very waves that once carried hope to the shore. On one such storm-tossed evening, a lone warrior stood at the edge of the world, staring out into the endless expanse of the sea. His armor, weathered from countless battles, glimmered under the dying light of the setting sun, yet his heart, as hardened as the sword at his side, felt nothing but the cold embrace of loneliness. Unbeknownst to him, his destiny was forever entwined with the depths below. The ocean, like a patient lover, had waited for the moment to reveal itself. The winds carried a song, soft, haunting, like a forgotten dream. It was a song only a chosen few could hear, and it beckoned him closer, urging him toward a fate that had been written long before his birth. He was unaware that his life was about to be changed forever by a love that the sea itself had long guarded, a love so pure, so dangerous, that it would spark a war unlike any the world had ever seen. Her voice was like nothing he had ever heard before, soft, mesmerizing, drifting through the air like the scent of a flower caught in the breeze. The warrior stood frozen, his senses heightened as the melody wrapped around him, pulling him closer to the very edge of the sea. It was a song of sorrow, of longing, of something ancient and powerful, calling out to him from the depths below. The waves seemed to carry the sound, whispering it to the shore, and for the first time, the warrior felt the weight of something far greater than the battles he had fought. This was no ordinary melody. It was a haunting invitation, a summons from a creature who lived beyond the world of men. A siren, hidden beneath the rolling tides, was calling him. Its song both beautiful and tragic. He could feel it in his bones, a pull so deep that it seemed to reach into the very core of his soul. It was a cry for help, a cry for something he could not yet understand, but deep within, he knew he was meant to answer. Yet, as much as the song called to him, there was an undeniable tension beneath its surface. This creature, this siren, was torn, not just by the pull of the sea, but by something even more dangerous, the clash between love and loyalty. She was bound by ancient oaths, by the very heart of the ocean itself, but love, a love she had never expected, now threatened to shatter those chains. She longed to rise, to meet the man who had unknowingly become her salvation. But the tides of duty and the war raging above the waters kept her bound, and in that struggle, she was as much a prisoner as the warrior who. The warrior had sailed into waters that whispered of old legends, places where few men dared to tread, and fewer still returned to speak of what they had seen. The ship cut through the waves with steady determination, but the air seemed thick with a strange, unspoken warning, as though the sea itself was trying to protect some ancient secret from being uncovered. The sky above was dark, heavy with the promise of a storm, yet there was something about the waters below that seemed to call to him, something he couldn't quite place, but something he felt in the very marrow of his bones. And then, as if the sea itself had parted to reveal its truth, he saw her. At first, it was just a flicker beneath the waves, an emerald flash that seemed to glow with an eerie, otherworldly light. But as the ship drew closer, the outline of her figure emerged, rising from the deep like a creature of myth, her body shrouded in the mist of the sea. The warrior's heart skipped a beat as their eyes met for the first time. Her eyes, the color of the deepest oceans, shimmered in the moonlight, glowing with a light that seemed impossible in the dark waters. But it wasn't just her eyes that captivated him. It was the sorrow they held, a sorrow that seemed to span centuries. In those depths, he saw the weight of ages, the burden of love lost to time, the ache of longing that had never found its end. Her gaze held him, not with the seduction of a siren, but with the quiet grief of a soul trapped between two worlds, one that belonged to the sea and one that longed for the touch of the land. He knew, without a single word spoken, that he had stumbled upon something far greater than any battle he had ever fought. A love, perhaps, and a war, both more ancient than the very ocean she called home. The night was a cloak of shadows, and the only light came from the moon, pale and cold as it watched over them. The warrior stood at the edge of the shore, his breath steady but his heart racing. He had heard the legends, had felt the weight of the warnings, tales of men who had been lost to the sea, of creatures whose beauty hid the dangers of a world no mortal should dare enter. Yet, none of those stories had prepared him for the truth he now faced. She emerged from the water like a dream made flesh, her skin glistening with the touch of the sea, her hair cascading like silver strands in the moonlight. Her eyes, those same emerald eyes, searched his face, and for a brief moment, the world held its breath. The warrior knew this was not a meeting of chance, but a crossing of fates. They were worlds apart. He, a man of the land, bound by the laws of kings and kingdoms, and she, a siren of the sea, whose existence was tied to ancient, unbreakable oaths. Her voice, once a haunting melody, now seemed to carry an unspoken sadness, knowing that their love was doomed before it could even begin. And yet, under the moon's soft glow, they were drawn to each other as though the universe itself had conspired to bring them together. No words were spoken, but the silence between them was more profound than any conversation could ever be. They understood the unspoken truth. Their worlds could never merge. He could not live beneath the waves, and she could not abandon the sea. Yet, their hearts, wild and unyielding, refused to heed the warnings of ancient laws. In that moment, beneath the stars and the whispering tides, they found a love that was both impossible and inevitable. Their hearts, though bound by fate's cruel hand, beat as one. For in love, even the strongest laws could not stop the forces that pulled them together. The kingdom had always been at peace, or so it seemed. But peace, like the calm before a storm, is often nothing more than a fragile illusion. When the whispers of the forbidden love between a warrior and a siren found their way to the king's ears, it was not just the heart of a ruler that was stirred. It was the pride of an entire kingdom. A love born of the sea, a love that could tear the very fabric of order apart, was a threat that could not be allowed to stand. The king's throne room grew heavy with tension as his advisors, men and women of great power, looked to him for a response. But the king needed no counsel. His eyes, cold and unyielding, were fixed on the horizon, where the sea stretched endlessly, a reminder of the enemy lurking just beyond the shore. He had always believed in the strength of his people, in the unwavering loyalty of his soldiers. But the siren's song had woven a spell that no man could resist, and the thought of losing control over his kingdom to a creature of the deep filled him with a burning fury. The drums began to echo through the streets, deep, rhythmic beats that vibrated the very ground beneath their feet. The sound was a call to arms, a warning to all who would defy the king's command. No siren would seduce his soldiers without consequence. No creature from the deep would ever have the power to undermine the strength of his rule. War was on the horizon, and the king's wrath was a force unlike any the land had ever known. His soldiers, fierce and loyal, would march into the depths if necessary, for no man, or woman, was worth the cost of losing everything they had fought for. Yet, unbeknownst to them, the battle they were about to face would not only be fought with arrows and swords, but with hearts and souls torn between love and duty, between the surface and the depths. The battlefield was a storm of chaos, the air thick with the sounds of war, clashing steel, the war cries of men, and the sharp whistle of arrows slicing through the sky. The warrior stood at the heart of it all, his sword raised high, his eyes fixed on the enemy before him. The king's soldiers, his brothers in arms, fought alongside him, but there was a heaviness in his chest that no blade could cut through. It was a weight that had nothing to do with the war at hand. It was the weight of a choice that had haunted him since the day he first saw her. Beneath the chaos of battle, in the recesses of his mind, he heard the song again, the haunting melody that had first called him to the sea. The siren's voice echoed in his thoughts, a whisper carried on the wind, calling him back to the water, to her. He had made a promise to her, a vow to return, but now, as the cries of war filled his ears, he was torn between two worlds, two loves, each pulling him in a different direction. The land he had sworn to protect, the people who looked to him as their warrior, their hero. These were the people who needed him now. His sword, his loyalty, his very life had been given to them. But the siren, she was a love that could not be contained, a love that called to him from the depths, a love that could drown him if he gave in to it. As the swords clashed around him and arrows darkened the sky, the warrior stood at a crossroads. He knew the king would never forgive him, that his people would never understand. But how could he deny the pull of the ocean, the yearning in his heart that told him there was something more beneath the waves than war and duty? He had never believed in the magic of the sea, in the power of its creatures. But now, with the scent of blood in the air and the weight of love heavy on his soul, he realized there was no escaping it. His heart ached for her, for the love that could never be fully his, and yet, he was bound to it by forces greater than any battle. The choice was clear. He could fight for his people, continue down the path of duty and honor, or he could leave it all behind, dive into the depths for the love that awaited him beneath the waves, a love that could save him or drown him forever. She had promised him, sworn to protect him from the wrath of the sea, to shield him from its depths, its fury. But the ocean, ancient and unforgiving, demands payment for every vow, every promise made beneath its endless expanse. No creature, no matter how powerful, could escape its hunger for sacrifice. And now, as the waves began to rise with an unnatural ferocity, the warrior realized that the price of their love was one he was unprepared to pay. The sea would take what it was owed, and no promise, no matter how heartfelt, could stop it. In the heat of battle, when the world was chaos and blood, the warrior's closest friend, someone he had trusted above all others, turned on him. With a whispered word, a single, venomous act, the secret of his forbidden love was revealed. The enemy, once unaware of the truth beneath the waves, now knew everything. The warrior's heart shattered as the truth echoed through the camp. Both kingdoms, his and hers, now wanted their love to drown beneath the weight of their betrayal. It was no longer a fight for honor or pride. It was a war to erase the love that had crossed the lines of land and sea, a love that both sides saw as a threat to their power. Now, they would stop at nothing to see it sink, to bury it beneath the tides and the steel of their armies. The war, once confined to the shores, soon bled into the very heart of the ocean. Sirens, their bodies transformed into deadly warriors of the deep, rose from the murky waters with sharpened fins and eyes burning with fury. They fought with a ferocity born of the sea, their songs now twisted into war cries. Against them stood the king's finest soldiers, their swords gleaming with the light of the moon, cutting through the dark waters. Beneath the surface, where the light could not reach, the battlefield became a graveyard, blood mingling with salt water, creating a red tide that stained the ocean forever. No land-based war could compare to this, where every swing of a sword, every slash of a fin, was a desperate struggle for survival in a world that had once been peaceful. The ocean had become a battleground, where love and hatred collided, and neither side could afford to lose. As the final battle loomed, he stood at the water's edge, torn between the woman he loved and the people he had sworn to protect. The weight of his oath pulled him back to the land, but his heart ached for the depths where she waited for him. The Siren Queen's eyes shimmered with ancient sorrow as she offered him a choice: abandon his humanity and live beneath the waves, or watch his love fade like the tides, slipping through his fingers forever. Each option felt like a death, but the price of love was always greater than he had imagined. But the sea has no favorites, no mercy for those who dare challenge its ancient will. Even the siren, with her beauty and power, could not escape the ocean's unrelenting hunger for sacrifice. For the sea, love was a fleeting thing, a gift given only to be taken back in the cruelest of ways. No creature, no matter how deeply they were tied to its depths, could outrun the tide of fate it demanded. And as the waves surged higher, the warrior realized that neither he nor the siren could escape the price the ocean had set for their love. As the final arrow flew, time seemed to slow, its sharp tip cutting through the air with a promise of both destruction and finality. Hearts shattered on both sides, those of soldiers bound by duty, and those of lovers bound by an impossible fate. Love had sparked this war, but now, in its final, devastating moment, it could not save them from the flames it had ignited. The battle was over, but the price was too great, and in the ashes of what remained, love lay broken, drowned by the tide of violence it had once sought to defy. For the first time in centuries, the ocean turned red with grief, as if the very heart of the sea wept for what it had lost. The waves, once wild and unforgiving, now rolled gently, mourning a love too pure for the surface, too fragile for the depths. The water, once a symbol of strength, became a reflection of the sorrow that lingered between the land and the sea. It had claimed so much, but this was a loss even the ocean could not bear. In the silence that followed, the depths held its sorrow, and the world above stood still, watching as love, once fierce and bright, was swallowed by the unyielding tide. His sword, once a symbol of his loyalty and strength, now lay discarded at the ocean's edge, its blade dull and abandoned. The warrior stood at the shore, the salty wind tugging at his hair, his gaze fixed on the endless expanse of water before him. The world around him had changed. His people, his duty, and even his very soul had been torn between two worlds. But the sea, with all its promises and sacrifices, had claimed him in ways no sword could ever protect him from. Though he stood on solid ground, his heart had long since been pulled beneath the waves. It belonged to the sea now, lost to the depths, where the siren's song still echoed, haunting the caverns of his mind. It was a melody he could never forget, a call that had once drawn him near and now kept him tethered to a love that could never be. The tide seemed to whisper her name, and in those moments, the warrior could still hear her voice, soft and sorrowful, echoing through the vastness of the ocean. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of a choice he could never undo. The land he fought to protect, the kingdom he had once sworn to serve, now felt distant, like a fading dream. The siren had never been just a lover, but the very essence of a world he had only touched briefly. And now, even though the battle was over, even though the war had left its scars, the ocean called to him, and there was no strength left to resist. The sword at his side, once the weapon of his fate, no longer held meaning. His soul had already been claimed by the sea, and as the waves lapped gently at his feet, he knew he would never return. His love, his sorrow, and his future were now woven into the tides, where they would remain forever, lost to the depths. The ocean had taken him in a way no battle ever could, and in its embrace, he found peace, even as the world above continued without him. They became legends, whispers of their names carried across the seas, passed from one sailor to the next, woven into the very fabric of ocean lore. Their love was spoken of in hushed tones, the story of a warrior and a siren who defied the laws of kingdoms, of hearts that bled with passion but were torn apart by the tides of fate. Their tale was one of both beauty and tragedy, a love so fierce, so consuming, that it could not be contained by the land nor the sea. The sailors, those who braved the deep, spoke of the warrior's undying loyalty and the siren's haunting song that would echo through the waves, a call that had once led a man to forsake everything for a love he knew he could never fully claim. They spoke of the storm that raged not just on the seas but within the hearts of the two lovers, a tempest of emotions that could never be calmed, not by kingdoms, nor by time itself. Every whispered word carried the weight of what had been lost, of what had been sacrificed for a love so pure that it defied every law of the land. Kings, rulers of empires, and warriors of great renown heard of the tale with fear and awe, for it was a story that transcended mere mortal boundaries. It spoke of love so powerful, so all-consuming, that it could tear down empires and drown nations. They feared the idea that such a love could spread, could inspire others to defy the very foundations of the world they had built. And so, they spoke of it only in caution, warning their men that such love could never be theirs, for it came at a price too steep to pay. They feared the ocean's pull, the siren's song, and the warrior who had dared to stand at the crossroads of two worlds. But no matter how much the kings tried to suppress it, the tale of the warrior and the siren lived on, passed down through the ages as a reminder of love's eternal power. It was a love that had torn apart hearts, kingdoms, and destinies, but it had never been able to escape fate. No matter how far the warrior sailed, no matter how deep the siren dove, the ocean had claimed them both. They were bound by it, by their love, and by the forces greater than they could ever understand. And so, their story became legend. A tale of impossible love that defied kingdoms, that shattered the very foundations of duty and honor. A love that, in the end, could not escape the cruel grip of fate, forever etched into the winds and the waves, a whisper that would never fade. Even now, on stormy nights, when the winds howl and the sky is a swirling mass of dark clouds, her voice rises from the depths of the ocean. It echoes across the waves, soft yet powerful, a haunting melody that carries the weight of centuries. It is the song of a love that started a war, a love that burned so fiercely it could never be contained, not by time, nor by kingdoms, nor by death itself. Her voice sings of the warrior who never returned, of the man who was lost to both land and sea, whose heart was claimed by the tides he could never escape. The sailors, those brave enough to face the storm, claimed to hear it, soft whispers at first, just a murmur over the roar of the wind, but then growing clearer, as if the sea itself mourns. They speak of the sound, melancholic, beautiful, and sorrowful all at once. It is a song that calls to them, a reminder of the price of love and the endless depths where souls are lost. It speaks of promises unfulfilled and hearts torn apart by forces beyond their control, of a love that could not survive in the face of fate. And though no one alive has seen the warrior or the siren since that final, fateful battle, their story lives on in the ocean's cry. For on those stormy nights, when the waves crash against the shore and the skies threaten to tear apart, her voice rises from the depths, eternal and unyielding. It is a song that will never cease, for it is not just the love of a warrior and a siren. It is the love of the ocean itself, a love that cannot die, a love that will live forever in the roar of the sea. If you've enjoyed this epic love story, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments below. Every like, share, and comment helps us bring more of these powerful tales to life. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable stories. Join our journey as we dive into the depths of love, war, and everything in between. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next chapter.